Prophet of Time by Joyce Lee. Chapter 4. Midnight passed by quietly at the Raven's Nest, and Noah had just finished checking the halls to make sure the night's occupants were safe in their rooms. It was easy to navigate through the building with his intimate knowledge of the tavern, and he made it downstairs without creaking the floorboards. Amelia smiled from her place at the freshly scrubbed bar. The warmth of the candlelight gave the woman's skin a dewy glow as the fire at the hearth died down. She'd placed 2 goblets and a bottle of wine in front of her in anticipation of their meeting. She was early. Then again, Travis was running late. As Noah came toward her, he took note of the ever-present darkness that hid behind his spy's seductive gray-green eyes.
"Finished herding your flock, Noah?"
she asked, her lips twitching into a crooked smile. Noah ignored the jibe. Many of his spies called him a shepherd when they thought he wasn't listening, and in more than one way it was true. He was the one who made sure the more ignorant occupants of the Raven's Nest abided by his curfew. No travelers were to stay downstairs after midnight, lest they attempt a midnight brawl, or worse, a stroll through the streets, only to be captured by the priesthood.
"What news from Crete? Was Coinmaster Hardy forthcoming with the information you sought?"
he asked, as he took a place at the bar in front of her.
"He was as tight-lipped as he is purse-bound. Still, he was no match for half a dozen drinks and enchanting company."
Her tone held the throaty accent of her people as she switched from her usual flirty facade to the stoic spy.
"The slave trade has doubled its profits over the past year. Hardy didn't want to divulge his and Lord Simon's mistakes, but they are starting to regret spending more time bolstering their courtesans instead of supporting those they govern."
Her lips were pressed firmly together with distaste as she awaited Noah's response.
"Slavery might have already been frowned upon over the last decade, but the bill to outlaw it hasn't passed by King Gerson yet. The social and economic consequences will set us back years,"
Noah said. He filled the 2 goblets as he listened to her go on.
"We should all be focusing on the present. Families are starving. Those who can are searching for greener pastures, and those who are lucky enough to find indentured work are barely making ends meet. Aside from that, those 2 entitled idiots have no idea what a slave's life is like."
"You could have enlightened them."
"And be questioned for knowing such details?"
she asked, eyebrows lifted.
"Sympathy can be a powerful tool."
Amelia glared and tossed her copper-streaked hair over her shoulder, the soft waves falling becomingly over her golden skin.
"It might be if you don't mind stripping your pride off as you would the clothes on your back."
Enslaving Ceruleans was rare and often looked down upon in their country, but Amelia and her family were fair game as Hukandans. Their tribe had damned them and left them in disgrace. Though the woman had escaped 3 years ago, her father was still in chains, if not dead. Noah forced himself to smile.
"This is coming from a woman who chooses to play games of seduction to get information."
Amelia bared her teeth. Her voice dripped poisoned honey.
"And what are your latest contributions? Noah. Staying in your haven of safety and being the ears for our master doesn't count. After gathering others like me, you've left recruiting and spying to the rest of us. We are the ones risking everything."
As she spoke, his smile faded, and his lips thinned. In the last half-year, he had done little actual spying, but there was a reason for it.
"I must sort truths from untruths, keep valid information and discard minor ones. When something needs my attention, it is usually of dire urgency. I try to take things in perspective, Amelia. You speak of pride, dignity, self-esteem. We all have it. You prioritize what others think of you more than what you think of yourself. I can understand that, but they are training assassins. They believe dirtying the hands of others will keep theirs clean. As one who escaped before your first kill, don't you sympathize with your enslaved brothers and sisters?"
She shrugged, and her eyes softened just a touch. But then she leaned forward.
"Not everybody is as lucky as me. I might empathize with them, but I made my choice. Society dictates what we are in the world. I can be a nameless woman or a noble's companion to those out there. What they think influences how they treat me,"
she said, gesturing to the door leading outside.
"But here, to you and the rest of our organization, I am a spy. I will not stand to be called a slave when I worked so hard to escape and become what I am today. I can't risk exposing myself to those who would seek to enslave me again. Yes, I have pride, and I'm sure you have something you wouldn't like being said about you because it will hurt yours. Tell me, what would that sore spot be? Shall I poke at that and see how you like it?
He couldn't stop an involuntary wince, and Amelia leaned back with a satisfied smirk. Noah cleared his throat.
Apologies, Emilia. I had no intent to upset you in such a manner. I just wanted to clarify. We share a common enemy and are trying to reach the same goal. I admit it is uncomfortable, but we must do what we can to fulfill the promises we made the day we met.
Believe me, Noah, I've given more than my heart and soul into this job. The only thing I refuse to do is reveal my past to strangers.
Noah composed himself and wished she never had to debase herself in such a manner. Not after all she'd already been through, but he had no say in what she chose to do, prioritize and respect. All he could do was ask, and so he steered the topic back.
So, what does Lord Simon plan to do?
With a quirk of the brow, she took a sip of her wine before responding.
Simon is too frightened to do anything but complain. He is all bark and no bite after he heard of Earl Evan's assassination last month.
Whoever opposes us will die, was written in Evan's blood. Anybody with an ounce of self-preservation would be cautious. So, what will you do? His people won't help you get your father back, and if you want to stay there, you might get caught by the men of the priesthood.
Emilia said nothing for a while. Silence filled the air, and Noah shifted in his seat. Even without looking at her, he could feel the light drain from her eyes. Noah had often seen her shiver with the memories of what those monsters had done to her over the years. Her escape had been bittersweet, desolate, and lonely, and the following year had been hard for her to endure. Noah had been 14 when he found her in the city of Basti. He saw her pain and the flaring heat of vengeance that hid behind her eyes. She was no guild member. She had killed to get away from her captives, and had executed those who dared to take advantage of her. Noah saw that strength in her eyes, and molded her into one of his first tools. And what a tool she had become. If Noah compared the Amelia he had found in the dark alleyways of Basti to the one in front of him, he probably wouldn't have recognized them as the same person. But of course, they weren't. Before, she had been little more than skin and bones, with her spirit dejected and unable to cope with guilt. Now she was soft and curved in all the right places, and she used it to her advantage with the mind of a chess player and the ruthlessness of any general. She'd traded the grime and dust she had used to hide from the slave owners for an armor fit to disarm anybody. The lightly powdered, striking beauty with pouty, red-lined lips, high forehead, and delicate bone structure was as proud and arrogant as any noble who overestimated their worth. And when enemies thought to strike her down, she was competent in disarming them. The sound of keys jostling behind the door to the tavern made Noah's head snap up. Emilia's dagger was out, and Noah reached over the bar to retrieve a blade. Both moved to the door with silent strides as the person standing on the other side of it slid a key into the lock. When it opened, Emilia had a blade to the intruder's throat, but Noah gripped her wrist.
Easy there. It's Travis. Let me in and close the door.
The man staggered back a step. With the dim lighting, Noah could barely make out his pale face.
Why didn't you come in through the roof?
Noah bit his words off as he crossed his arms after clearing Travis's way.
And who's on guard for the guild tonight?
Cain did his best, but he was alone, and only distracted 2 of my pursuers. And you know, it's difficult to climb when my arm's bleeding,
he said, trying to hide the strain in his voice with snark. Noah got a better look at the man. Blood coated Travis's hand as he pressed it against his upper arm. It dripped onto the freshly scrubbed floor despite his attempt to staunch the bleeding. He'd left a trail. But the men of the priesthood knew that homes and establishments were off limits. They worked better in the shadows and silence, not by disturbing the peace and gaining the attention of the people with no way to deny their involvement. Amelia locked the door before she rushed to fetch a basin of water. Noah led Travis onto the nearest stool.
What happened?
I was walking Shauna back to the house this afternoon,
Travis said, referring to his wife. She was 5 months pregnant with their first child, so Noah understood Travis's concern. Shauna and Travis had been quick to marry, and starting a family was one of their greatest priorities. Neither of them wanted to wait until it was too late.
I stayed too long and fell asleep.
The rip of cloth was like a screech in the silent air, and they both grimaced. Noah gritted his teeth and once again ripped the fabric of Travis's sleeve off his injured arm. The second time didn't seem as loud as the first, and the third severed the remaining strands of cotton.
And when you woke up, it was dark. You got injured on your way here.
Noah concluded. The trek from the Temple of Life and attending to his duties at the nest must have taken a toll on Travis.
You shouldn't have risked coming here. I never took you to be an idiot, Travis. You need to prioritize your safety.
He took in the injury and swallowed the uncomfortable knot in his throat. Travis's wound was deep and bleeding profusely.
Needle and thread, Amelia,
Noah said as she set a basin of water and strips of clean cloth on the table. He washed his hands.
I was already late. The master doesn't approve of tardiness.
You're not meeting with the master. You need to be safe to report, and risking that won't do us any good.
Noah said, cursing at his alter ego. Since he was wearing the mask of a servant while being the master, it was easy for him to deny his own mistakes, even ones as slight as reprimanding his people when they were unclear of their priorities. Yes, there was that word again. It haunted Noah as he watched his people suffer needlessly. He couldn't keep doing that anymore, couldn't keep changing the rules of his own game. Hypocrite. That was what he was. Coward. Unreasonable. Unfair. The blood took a while to clean up, and still it kept trickling down Travis's arm. Noah had done this for Dawn's father, Andrew, many times. The man frequently got injured when he slowed the priesthood down. The guild rarely ever harmed the priesthood. Not physically, anyway. Most times, they took to raiding their caravans, freeing and enlisting slaves to their cause, and even threatening the priesthood as they saw fit. Travis's brow furrowed as he closed his eyes, and Noah knew that it was caused as much by his reprimand as it was the sting of damp cloth against injured flesh. His teeth clenched as he gripped the table with his uninjured, blood-stained hand.
How is Shana? Has the midwife found any issues?
Noah asked, trying to keep the conversation light before he inquired about work. He absently noted how bright the room had become while he had been dabbing at the blood. The renewed crackling of the fire seemed a distant noise.
Her feet are aching, swollen. She sometimes has trouble sleeping. Shana woke me tonight, or the baby did. I felt it kick,
he said, a faint smile gracing his lips. Travis's brow slowly smoothed. Amelia came back with a needle and thread. Noah took note of the warm metal and nodded at her with approval. She had sterilized both objects with boiling water. She took a seat on Travis's other side while Noah shifted the wounded arm so he could see it in the firelight.
Do you have any names in mind?
Amelia asked, helping Travis wash the blood from his uninjured hand.
I've always found the idea of naming one's children after their grandparents strange, but it does keep their legacy alive.
Noah shook his head sharply while Travis's back stiffened at the mention of his family.
I will never allow the taint of my parents' memory near my child,
Travis said, frustration coloring his voice.
Every now and again, I have to remind myself of what we're all fighting for.
What did your parents do?
Amelia asked. Noah used the fingers of his left hand to push the two sides of the wound together while Travis was distracted. With his right hand, he guided the curved needle into the flesh before adjusting the angle to push it out. He was careful not to injure himself in the process. Tying it off gently, he repeated the action down the length of the wound as Travis spoke.
My mother was a priestess-turned-spy, and my father an assassin for the priesthood,
Travis said, gritting his teeth at the sharp pain.
They intended for me to walk in my mother's footsteps.
The air had grown stifling with Travis's words. Noah glanced up to see Amelia's eyes were wide and cold. His spies had been discouraged from interacting on a personal level to secure their safety. Noah was glad that Amelia's presence could somewhat distract Travis from the pain, but any relationship they would build might suffer from this flood of information.
How did you escape and find your way to Noah?
Noah wished Amelia luck getting that story out of Travis. Even he hadn't pried when the shaking, wide-eyed boy had dragged himself into a guild den.
It wasn't that difficult. I just let myself be as useless as possible.
Travis grunted as Noah continued stitching his flesh together.
They eventually gave me up as a lost cause and told me that they would offer me up as a sacrifice when we got back to the city. I spent 3 days at the Temple of Death so they could show me my fate. A priestess took pity on me and helped me escape.
Emilia stood to bring Travis some water when Noah paused to take in this new information. This gave Travis time to catch his breath from the strain and sip at his drink.
Did this priestess have a will of her own?
Noah asked. Travis squeezed his eyes shut.
I think so. She had been the one to complete the ritual sacrifice that night, but when it was over, she collapsed and cried. A few hours later, she snuck into my room and led me to a hole she'd been digging for her own escape. It was too small for her, but I was able to fit in and dig my way out. After I got settled in the Guild of Life, I tried to go back to find the hole, but a large boulder blocked the way.
Noah tilted his head, both inspecting his work and wondering if pain really was the best way to get such personal information out of his people. Doubtful, but since Travis was being so forthcoming.
Did she give you her name?
He asked, tying the thread off and trimming it with the dagger Emilia had left on the table.
She said her name was Julia.
Travis said, lowering his head in relief. He hissed as Noah tightened a bandage over his injury.
Sorry.
Noah said, loosening his grip on the bandages before knotting the two ends together. He bit the inside of his cheek so he wouldn't be tempted to ask about Julia, about his sister.
It's getting late, Emilia. Thank you for your help. Have a good night.
Nodding at Noah and placing a gentle hand on Travis's shoulder, the Hukandan bid the two men good night and went upstairs.
And what news is there from the Temple of Life?
Travis sighed and took another sip of his drink.
More followers have sought guidance from the Temple of Life in secret. Because of the rumors about Earl Evan's death, people are restless and are not willing to show their support openly. They see the results of questioning the priesthood and their followers, and they blame King Gerson for not moving against them. Senior from the Temple of Healing has been targeted by the men of the priesthood. She narrowly escaped an assassination attempt last week.
Thomas and Senior might not be a part of our master's network, but they are more influential for working with those in need. It would be ideal if we can send more people to protect them.
I've heard of another rumor on the road back, so I didn't have time to confirm it.
Travis said. He glanced over at the 2 goblets of wine at the bar.
It's about the slaves, and I think both of us will need a drink before we will have the stomach to talk about it.
Noah shook his head but obliged. Only when they had consumed half the contents of their cups did they continue their conversation.
Hukondans, or desolate islanders?
Neither. It's about Cerulean slaves.
Noah's cup stopped midway to his lips, and he gradually lowered it.
They're taking Ceruleans as well?
They're taking children. It started over 2 years ago.
And we're only hearing about it now.
Noah stood and busied his hands cleaning up the mess.
How? Why?
I suspect the priesthood has been dressing as common brigands and raiders to sack small towns for loot and slaves. Since the other slaves have heard about us from their masters, there are whispers of revolt. It's not happened yet, but it might in the next few months, a few years at the latest.
And they'll be slaughtered. The labourers aren't fighters, and they wouldn't have the strength to rebel after all their hours in the field. Besides, the slave owners will know. They always do.
Yes, and that's why the owners have started rationing their food, and any small infractions can lead to punishment. Even in the south, they're trying to weaken them, even though they can afford the upkeep of strong, able slaves. There are reports of 12 slaves being whipped and executed just to make an example. The select few gladiators who could win their freedom through combat have only known the priesthood and are initiated into their ranks as free men.
Shaking his head, Noah slumped back into his chair. Since he had emptied and rinsed the basin, wiped down the table, and cleaned the bloodied tools, he had nothing else to focus on but the conversation.
Do you have any idea how many slave owners there are? How has the priesthood been gathering them?
Noah asked. Travis shook his head.
All I know is that they're recruiting them from Hukanda. Since slavery there is so widely accepted, Some of them are expanding their filthy profession to our country. They teach the priesthood how to own and discipline slaves properly so they'll be compliant.
Noah placed his palms over his eyes and attempted to rub the disconcerting sorrow and guilt from his mind.
Unbelievable,
He said with a sigh.
The issues just keep piling on, don't they?
Travis didn't say anything. When Noah looked at him, there was a knowing pity in his eyes.
You always look like you carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, Noah.
Noah took a deep breath and slowly let it out. He forced a serene smile onto his face and took Travis's uninjured arm.
I'm not carrying it alone. Come, let's get you to bed.
Travis would have happily volunteered to sleep on the table if Noah hadn't helped the spy to a room on the ground level. After checking on the bandage and leaving Travis to sleep, Noah found a single candle flickering at the bar. Looking out the window, Noah could see the sky had turned black as pitch. It was late, and he was tired. Still, there was a pool of blood on the floor of his doorstep to clean up. Too many things to think about, and too many things to do. Tomorrow was another day filled with debriefing a few agents, adjusting his agendas, and finally meeting his potential sponsor. His goal was to make it bearable.
Leanne and Clive melted into the shadows of an abandoned alley after leaving Lady Violet's entourage. A striped headscarf and face covering lended her anonymity in the streets of her city and branded her as an ambassador rather than the Princess of Cerealia. According to Clive, this alley housed a passage to an underground safe house. The door was hidden in plain sight, and Clive probed at each dark knot in the wall until one finally gave way. With 2 fingers hooked in the empty space where the knot was, Clive pulled, revealing the entrance to a staircase leading down into a dark, ominous void. A single lamp and flint had been placed on a barrel on their right, and Clive lit it before Leanne closed the door. She gripped the small dagger at her side, wishing she was more proficient at using the weapon, but Clive had reassured her of their safety during this meeting. Court politics had taught her never to fully trust others. Everybody had their own agendas. Loyalty didn't exist, but as long as they could gain something from each other, even the selfish elite could work together. They proceeded down the steps to the far end of the hall, and finally to the last door on the right. Clive knocked in a 2-1-3 pattern before entering the room. As expected, they were already there. The hard-packed earth and smooth-cut walls were lit by candles, and their silence was only broken by the click of the door shutting behind Leanne.
You're late.
The young man stood from the table littered with papers. Noah's mop of messy brown hair looked as if he'd run fingers through them time and time again. The firelight only highlighted the bags under his bloodshot eyes. The older companion at his side leaned forward and smiled at them with a calm serenity Noah lacked. They could be mistaken for brothers, and one could only expect the eldest to take responsibility of this venture. Leanne had to admit it was plausible to consider either of them to be spy master. Noah's dirt-smudged tunic and trousers had been patched up a few times, while the other one was dressed in worn but clean clothes. Both of them shared the long, lean physique of men used to running through the streets and climbing the walls of buildings to escape death's servants. But there was a certain cunning in Noah's amber eyes that the other man did not have.
Apologies, but I think you will understand once you know with whom you speak that it has been difficult to get away,
Clive said. Leanne pulled away the cloth that hid her features and lowered her hood, revealing a smile she'd perfected in court.
It has been a busy day, but I trust we can come to an agreement now that we can speak face to face,
she said to the man still seated at the table. He showed no sign of recognition, but Noah did. It was a small tell, the almost unnoticeable widening of his eyes. He returned the smile with a smirk.
We see.
Noah said, exchanging a glance with his companion.
My name is Noah, and this is my master, Pierre.
Leanne feigned a puzzled expression.
And why is Pierre not speaking for himself? I would like to discuss my situation and ideas to stop the priesthood directly.
He cannot speak, my lady. His tongue was cut off by one of the priesthood when he was young. I am his eyes, ears, and most especially his voice.
Well, that was convenient. It was probably a true story, too. Leanne made a note not to underestimate this Noah. Flawed as he was smart. Pierre probably couldn't read either, but the illusions were placed in front of them for all to see. Leanne nodded, and Clive pulled a chair out for her.
First of all, I regret that you had to endure such suffering, Pierre, but I congratulate you on the network you have built over the years.
She said, her eyes moving from one man to the other.
And you know that, despite my title, I have nothing to my name that can help you in combat.
Noah sat as she spoke, and his brows furrowed. Pierre's expression didn't shift except to nod his thanks to her.
I instructed my messenger to pawn off some of my jewels for currency over the past few months, and I brought a few small tokens to show my dedication to your cause. I want you to use it to build up your network further,
she said, reaching into her skirt for her purse. She dumped out the contents, revealing 24 gold coins.
I believe these can help you pay for a couple of your most able spies to reach the desolate isles and Hukanda. I have a friend there, in particular, who might be of use to us.
There was a pause as Noah and Pierre examined the gold, and Pierre shook his head.
You can hire your own messenger to reach this friend of yours. Why ask us when you have the funds to do so yourself?
I am not sure where he is. The last I heard, Reynard was serving in a legion led by Queen Tatiana of the Desolate Isles. They were hired by a Hukandan tribe to settle disputes. This arrangement helps you expand and helps me get in contact with Reynard. Both outcomes aid us in the long run.
You think asking your mercenary friend will free you from any monetary obligations?
Noah said, not even making a show of glancing at Pierre this time.
Going to the desolate island king with our plight is not something we can afford, nor would it be wise for word to get out that I seek the aid of foreigners.
Leanne said. She looked at the papers scattered on the desk and picked one up.
The profits from your raven's nest are more lucrative than I thought. Do you have a merchant that helps you?
We have a mutual understanding with our vendors. And as grateful for the coin as we are, Pierre and I need to speak privately about your ideas.
Noah stood.
We are not done yet, my impatient friend,
Leanne said, motioning for Noah to sit down.
As competent a soldier as Reynard is, he is still only one man. He can train the guild members and your spies in combat. For now, though, knowledge is much more valuable. If we discover something to defeat the priesthood without more bloodshed, we might not even need him.
Noah leaned back in his chair, and Pierre once again exchanged troubled glances with him.
What knowledge do you seek that you don't already have access to?
The temples guard their libraries against all those who seek to abuse their power, but my messenger recalls gaining access to Diriel's temple in his youth. There is a vast amount of knowledge to be gained there.
Clive finally spoke.
From my recollections, there is no information on how the priesthood came to be. Those histories have been stripped from all the libraries I have come across.
So what luck do you think we'll have?
Clive shrugged.
Focusing on the Temple of Death might have been a mistake. Why focus on the most closed-off god when we can explore what the others have to offer us? They do strive for balance after all.
I have heard you have connections to some of the temples, and as your master's most competent spy, I would like for you to personally see to this matter, Noah.
Pierre's lips twitched upward in a smirk, and he nodded his agreement. Noah glared at his master before taking a deep breath in and breathing out slowly.
That is not an unreasonable request. I will see to it.
Well, I suppose you have a new assignment then,
Leanne said with a smile.
Report back to me as soon as you can, and we can discuss things further.
She stood and was about to turn to leave when Noah interrupted.
Why are you doing this? You didn't need to sell your jewels or entrust us with funds. This isn't your fight.
Clive growled a warning. It was something Leanne had never heard from her spy.
You question the princess's honor.
We don't know enough about the princess to put our blind faith in her,
Noah said. Leanne placed a hand on Clive's arm to calm him.
From a young age, my mother taught me that my people are my life. I sacrifice for them and their happiness, their prosperity. When I saw my father refuse to stand up for them, I decided enough was enough. I have to be the one to make a difference. This guild has been an inspiration for me, and I am determined to do my part. What good are jewels and riches when the world around you is falling apart, and its people are suffering needlessly?